Welcome to another episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! Player Ranks. In this series, we rank various Yu-Gi-Oh! Themes based on your comments and suggestions. Come back every Tier List Tuesday to see an all-new installment of this series. Alright, what's up guys? We are back with another tier list. This is yet again another request. If you want to check out a bunch of these videos, there's actually a playlist available on the channel where you can go from one to the next, to the next, to the next, and watch these endlessly. But before we get to that, do you play Master Duel? And do you want to really improve your Master Duel experience?
Are you ready to take your Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel play experience to a new level? The Untapped GG Companion is here for you. Use the deck tracker to know exactly what cards you have in your deck, and to go over any cards you aren't familiar with yet by hovering over them. It instantly updates when you draw a card, and automatically hides if you check your extra deck or graveyard. This is the perfect tool to help you master a new deck. The Untapped GG Companion also lets you import decks directly into the game in seconds. Copy any YDK or YDKE deck string, create a new deck in-game, click the Start Auto Import button, and let us take the wheel. Once the duel is over, check your win rate on your personal stats page. Brag among your friends and share your decks so they can import them into the game too. Start your path to master today by downloading the Untapped GG Companion at ygom.untapped.gg.
Alright, now for the tier list. Today we are doing win conditions. Like I said, this is one that a lot of different people over the course of time have recommended. There's so many that are on my list, so if there's any that you want to see, obviously the comments are where you go. But today we are doing win conditions. So this is basically every single win condition other than the most normal win condition, which is just attack your opponent and reduce their life points to 0. That is the most typical run-of-the-mill one. We are reviewing all of the other ones and how their impact has had on the game throughout the years. First of all, we're doing Hollus. This one is kind of interesting. It's actually just OCG exclusive. It's Hollus, the creator of light. This is like the monster that Yugi summoned at the end of the anime, if you remember. Basically, this card is you tribute 3 Egyptian gods, so Slifer, Ra, Obelisk, and then you summon this card, and as soon as this thing hits the field, you win the duel. This card isn't particularly difficult to summon, especially as they keep releasing more and more support, but I mean, you're not going to be able to summon all of the gods uninterrupted. That's kind of the issue with it. There was a combo I've seen before. I believe it was on Samurai X1's channel where there was like a 1-card combo that summoned this thing out. Again, this is one of those things that you can do it, but just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. And again, it's just OCG exclusive, so you couldn't do it even if you wanted to be honest with you. I'd say, honestly, this is probably like a D tier. The chance of this happening is pretty slim, but I might actually I might have to move this later because some of these are really, really bad, and I think this might be a little bit low compared to some of the others. Next is Exodios. Exodios is actually not a bad card at all. It's actually quite good. So it's good in decks like World Chalice. It's good in decks like Zodiacs. It's good in decks that basically fill up their graveyard, and then you want to shuffle back all the monsters in the graveyard back into the deck and then reuse them. So it's great for decks like that. Like Zodiacs is a perfect example, right? You go through, you make a 6 material Zeus, and then if you don't, like if they out your Zeus and you don't win the duel, you summon Exodios and then shuffle back all the Zodiacs and all of the extra deck monsters, and then you can kind of redo everything all over again. So that part of it is really, really cool. Now the problem with Exodios is its win condition is a little tough to do. So basically what it does is it shuffles everything back from the graveyard back into the deck, and then it summons itself, and it summons itself, and then this card basically has another effect where when it battles, you can send a monster from your deck to the graveyard. It can be any monster whatsoever. So it can be an Exodia piece. It can be anything. Like it can be cards that float and do effects if you want them to. Like for example, you can send like a zombie monster that has a graveyard effect. You can send like Glow Up Bloom, for example. You can send anything you want to the graveyard. So you can send Lightsworn Wolf if you wanted to the graveyard. You can send any monster to the graveyard. But basically, if you can do this 5 times and you send 5 Forbidden One cards to the graveyard with the use of this effect, you win the duel. Now the problem with this is you basically have to enter 5 battle phases and keep this guy on board the entire time. and basically just continue to send and send and send and send and send and send. And if your opponent outs this guy, he can't be normal summoner set, so you have to summon another Exodios, and you would basically have to do that all over again. The problem is this is actually quite slow, and it would require like 5 different battle phases to do. So I would honestly put this in C tier. It's a little too slow for me, but it's more consistent, I think, than Hollus, because you really only need 5 battle phases to get it off. But again, you just have to kind of protect the castle with this thing. But this thing is actually not like that bad of a card overall. Next is Exodia. Exodia is a little weird. Exodia hasn't topped in years. Like recently, we've seen we've seen it do better at like a YCS. At like in a YCS, there was a match and it actually won the match. I believe it won the match or won the game. But basically, they used the spellcaster monster that searches. Spellcaster normal monster every single time it's sent to the graveyard. They basically looped it with the link monster, special summons a spellcaster monster back. I'm forgetting some of the names, but basically they loop those cards in order to basically search out the Exodia pieces. It's essentially an FTK. It's a combo FTK. It can play through hand traps. I mean, the issue with it usually with a deck like that is going second. It's one of those decks that, you know, it can top, right? You can go to locals and definitely top. You can do something like that, but it's a little tougher. Other than that, there's the Panda version of the Exodia deck, and then there's, of course, the FTK, draw your entire deck, Exodia version of the deck. The problem is Exodia really hasn't been consistently topping for years and years and years and years. I would say it's probably somewhere in B tier. It's just the problem with Exodia is you have to draw 5 bricks in order to win the duel, and it's tough enough to draw. Like all of the draw, even regular old draw 2 card cards are limited, banned, depending on what you're playing, what format you're playing in. So to draw 5 cards that aren't going to help you do anything other than participate in like your hand can be a little bit tough sometimes. I'd say B tier is probably the fairest spot there. All right, next is Exodia the Legendary Defender. If you remember, this is actually also from the anime. This is from the last season where Exodia is summoned by Solomon and then he fights the darkness monster. I forget his name. It's like the Super Diabound, but it's a really cool part of the anime. It's like they look like 2 Megazords or something, 2 Gundams fighting. It was a really cool part of the anime, and there's a reference in the text for this, of course. But basically what this card does is you contribute 5 monsters you control, and then this card gains attack equal to the 5 monsters and defense equal to the 5 monsters defense. So basically it comes out with way too much attack and way too much defense, but you have to tribute 5 monsters in order to do it. Again, in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, that is not hard to do. Like summoning 5 monsters is not, it's just not that difficult, right? You have the most basic of combo decks can summon 5 monsters. Like it's not even something you think about. It's something that's so you flood the field. Like any old combo deck can do it. But yeah, you summon 5 monsters and then you tribute them, and then you get this gigantic monster with all this attack. It doesn't have any protection whatsoever, but it has an effect where if you destroy a dark monster, a dark fiend monster, you win the duel. Now, that's the part of the effect that's a little bit troublesome, because while you can theoretically do that, like that is possible, right? You can do that. You basically need to play cards like Geonator, Transverser. You need to play cards like Creature Swap, a Shien Spy, basically cards that will give your opponent a Dark Fiend monster so that you can cards that will give your opponent a Dark Fiend monster so that you can attack over that Dark Fiend monster and then win the duel. Now, inherently, this can never be an FTK. This can only be kind of like an OTK instant win condition. And the problem with that is your opponent, you're going to have to go second to do this, right? So if you're going second and doing this, you have to essentially play through your opponent's interruptions and through your opponent's hand traps, guaranteed, because you have to let them go first in order to do this. So there's automatically kind of an inconsistency aspect to this. You can run Dark Ruler on War, but the cards at 1, I mean, not cards at 1, but you can play 3 copies, and you know, what are the chances that you draw it? You can't play evenly matched. You can't play most of the really good going second cards. So you basically have to give your opponent this card in some way while playing through interruptions, while summoning 5 monsters, tributing those 5 monsters, and then successfully getting an attack off without this card dying. And by doing all of that, then you get to win, and that is like a really kind of a tough thing to do. It's not impossible by any means, but it's definitely a tough thing to do, and it's more possible than some of the others. I think it's better than Exodios, for example, for sure. Just because Exodios is, it takes 5 battle phases. This only takes 1 battle phase, but it requires 5 monsters plus a creature swap type of card plus playing through your opponent's board. I'd say probably B tier is fair for where it is right now. Next is Flying Elephant. I've never successfully seen anybody get this off because you'd have to be playing against the biggest moron on earth. This is another anime win condition. A lot of these have been, actually I think all of these so far have been anime win condition. This is actually, Pegasus used this card against Bandit Keith. Basically what this card does is, if this card would be destroyed by card effect, once you can protect this card. Once, only by card effect. And then if your opponent attempted to destroy this card by card effect, the effect protected it. During the next turn, you win the duel. Now the problem is, all of this is written on the card. See, in the anime, it doesn't. None of that is on the card in the anime. And the anime doesn't say that. They just get they have cards with nothing on them. But in Yu-Gi-Oh, your opponent can just read that, and all they have to do is just read, like, so if my card effect tries to destroy this and you protect it, the next turn you win. Okay, so I'm just not going to do that, right? All you have to do is just, like, not Dark Hole the Flying Elephant. Just don't Raigeki the Flying Elephant. Don't try to destroy the Flying Elephant. You can do anything else. You can attack over it. You can Nightmare Griffin, Nightmare Unicorn. You can get rid of it, banish it. You can do any other thing. Return it to hand, send it to deck, banish it face down. You can do any other thing to this Flying Elephant except for destroy it and then end your turn. That is, like, it's so bad, and it requires your opponent to do it. So you cannot prompt this in any way. You can't build your deck around this. You have to build around the fact that you're playing against a moron. That is the only way to, like, successfully do this win condition. So honestly, I'd say it's probably an F tier. Like I said, I've never seen anybody pull it off, because you can't pull it off. You have to be playing against an opponent that is stupid. That's the only way to do it. So F tier is probably the only place that I could possibly place it. Venominaga is probably in D tier. This one just has a lot of steps that make it very, very difficult to do. So basically, it needs to be something with Snake Deity. Snake Deity is a card that you can activate when Venominaga, which is the male version of Venominaga, is destroyed. And then when that's destroyed, I believe by battle, not by card effect. When that's destroyed, or maybe it is by card effect. It's one of the two. It's either by card effect or by battle, but it's by card effect. So when he is destroyed by card effect, you can special summon Venominaga from your deck or from your hand. And then when she hits the field, she's actually a good card. But the problem is Venominaga is not a good card. He can't be, I think, special summoned from the hand or something like that. But he's got a lot of stipulations to him too. So he's difficult to pull off. Not like super difficult, because you could summon him off another effect, but you just can't, like... you can summon off his own effect or another, like, effect, but he has weird summoning restrictions himself. But this card is super weird. Basically, she's unaffected by everything. She can't even be targeted. She both can't be targeted and unaffected. That's old text if you've ever seen it. So she can't be affected. She can't be targeted. If she's destroyed by battle, you can banish a reptile monster from your graveyard, special summon her back, and then when you special summon her back, she... basically, yeah, she's like infinite. She just keeps coming back as long as you have reptiles in the graveyard. And then every time she inflicts battle damage to your opponent, by the way, she gains 500 for every reptile in the graveyard. Every time she inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you put a hyper venom counter on her. And once you have 3 of those, you win the duel. Now, her as an individual card, she actually is not that bad of a card. Summoning her is the problem. Like, getting her out onto the field requires 8 million different steps, and for that reason, I just cannot put her anywhere above D tier. Exodios, I can't believe I'm saying this, is actually a better version of her, because this just takes 5 battle phases and you can summon him at any time. This, while it's, tough to out her, it's so difficult to actually get to the point of summoning her, and that's why she is in D tier, unfortunately. Next, this is Needlebug Worm, or Needlebug, yeah, I believe it's Needlebug Worm. or Needlebug. I think it's just Needlebug. So basically what this card is supposed to represent decking out your opponent. Decking out your opponent has been something that people have tried for years and years and years. And just to give a quick history of it, there's a lot of different ways to deck out your opponent over the course of time, right? There's like Convulsion of Nature, FTK. People used to use Exchange of the Spirit, right, to switch the graveyard in the deck, and then you FTK your opponent like that. Empty Jar is one of the most premier versions of FTKing your opponent for years and years and years, and the most recent version that we have seen is Runic. So this has definitely been possible throughout time. It's topped regionals, YCSs, Shonen Jumps, every single part of the game ever. People have topped and won with decking out your opponent. It's something that is a semi-consistent strategy. In the OCG, when Runic came out, this was one of the biggest strategies ever. It just was really frustrating. You just play every single floodgate you can squeeze in addition to the Runic cards, and you win just like that. I would probably put this, I want to say an A tier, but I'm going to adjust the list at the end because this might end up, technically speaking, right, this is A tier. The only S tier is like regular. S tier is regular old beatdown. Like I attack with my monster and inflict life points to my opponent. This is probably A tier. It's right there. It might even be S tier. It's probably A tier. Next, this is Uzaki. This is supposed to represent Burn. So Burn is another one that's interesting. It's kind of like Deck Out. It's another kind of like alternate win condition technically, because it's not just attacking your opponent's life points. So this again has been one of those things that has come and gone in the game throughout the years. Burn has been like, just Burn in a variety of ways has been a deck that has been viable ever since they released kind of like enough spawn trap cards that could burn your opponent. And basically from like 2005 to 2017, there has always been some form of burn that has been viable in Yu-Gi-Oh! And it went from like just regular old what is it, like not goes in match, gravity bind, like gravity bind and a bunch of trap cards and stealth burn. It used to be that, and then it became chain burn, and then chain burn took off, and chain burn became a really consistent strategy, and it used to top all throughout like the Blue Eyes format, the DDD format, the Burning Abyss format, 2014, like all of those formats you'd regularly find at a big YCS, at a big Shonen Jump YCS regional. It wouldn't be uncommon to find a significant amount of like burn players like mixed in to the general crowd, because the deck was quite good and it was very difficult to side against, because you have to essentially play a lot of back row removal to kind of deal with all the burn cards, and all the burn cards are chainable, so you're activating things like Ceasefire, right? Your opponent like makes they put in cards that can get rid of your spawn trap cards, and you like chain up, I'm going to chain Ceasefire, and you just inflict a bunch of life points, and the card that they targeted no longer exists because you activate it, its effect resolved, and the destruction is irrelevant. But that has been very consistent up until 2017, and then Trickstars came out, and they were like the big consistent burn deck that came out. And the problem with Trickstars was they were good for a while as an engine, and it wasn't really ever played pure. The whole thing with Trickstars is people played Trickstars mixed with a Nightmare engine, mixed with something else. So we actually haven't seen burn played in a successful deck in probably about 5 years. Which is again kind of sad. So I'm going to go ahead and move this up here, and now I think I've figured out the spacing for this tier list. I think burn is probably A tier. It's one of those things where I think it's good, and there are opportunities to do well with it, but we haven't seen it in quite some time. You rarely see anybody playing any kind of burn decks. The best burn decks are probably Volcanics with the new support and Trickstars, but if I have to be 100% honest with you, neither of those decks are topping anytime soon. They're just not consistent enough, unfortunately. And then Chain Burn, there's just so much back row removal right now. It's just too difficult for them to really like. It's just too difficult for them to gain enough advantage to actually do anything. Because, like I said, there's just so much back row removal, and they've brought back so many things, and they've created new cards that are even better than some of the old ones. Like Harpy's Feather Dust is back at 1. The entire time that burn decks have been good, that's been banned. Now that's back. Lightning Storm does what Harpy's Feather Duster does what Harpy's Feather Duster does anyway, just as well. In addition to all the other back row removal cards that are in the extra decks now, all the back row removal deck cards that are in the main deck, like it's so easy to like deal with chain burn now. So I'd say probably A tier is probably there. It doesn't like consistently top, but I'd say once in a while you can still win. FA winners is, I want to say, it's either F or D. It's not good. Basically what it does is it has just a blanket effect where it protects your FA monsters, I believe, from card effects or battle. I don't remember exactly, but one of the two. It has a blanket protection. And then it has another effect where you can basically, when your FA monster, whose level is 5 levels higher than its original level, battles your opponent's monster, you can banish an FA field spell from your deck. And basically, you have to do this 3 times, and you banish 3 FA field spells, you win the duel. That is just kind of dumb. And again, it's just like one of those like Venominaga where it just like takes multiple turns and it's not that good. It's kind of the same weight as Exodios, but I think it's worse because then you got to play with Exodios. You don't have to play bricks. You just send Exodia pieces to graveyard, which are technically bricks, but these you have to like play field spells, which you can actually use because the field spells are good in the deck, but you have to keep those field spells in the deck and then banish them, which is kind of dumb. Again, I don't think this is the best way to play FAs. FA is a decent deck on its own. It's not like a super good deck, but it's probably like I want to say it's like a D tier deck, right? It's a D tier deck, and here we've got a D tier win condition. It's not very good. I'd say D tier is like more than fair for this. Jackpot 7. It's probably like a C tier. Basically, what this card does is if it's sent to the graveyard, you can banish it, and yeah, if this card is sent to the graveyard by your opponent's card effect, you can banish it. And then if it gets banished, yeah, that's where that effect is over. But basically, if that happens 3 times, you win the duel. So basically, and this is not once per turn. So the whole point with this is you put a Dark Scorpion, or I believe, yeah, it's a Dark Scorpion monster on your opponent's board. For old Yu-Gi-Oh! Those are like the Don's Lug monsters. There's a specific one. I think it's called the Dark Scorpions or something like that. But you basically put one of them on your opponent's side of the field through creature swap, or yeah, either creature swap or one of the other cards. Yeah, creature swap or Xian Spire, basically any card that could put a card onto your opponent's board, or Geonator Transverser. And then you activate a card called Hippo Carnival, which summons 3 Hippo tokens on your side of the field with 0 attack. You attack into your opponent's Dark Scorpion monster 3 times, and you send that card, forces you to send a card to the graveyard. Like it forces your opponent, well, to send a spell card to the graveyard. So your opponent's controlling this Dark Scorpion, you're sending this to the graveyard, you banish it, you basically attack with your 3 Hippo tokens, and you win the duel. That's it. It's actually quite simple to do. The only thing is you have to draw very specific cards. So you have to draw the Hippo Carnival card, number 1, and then you have to draw this Jackpot's, not this Jackpot 7. You draw the Hippo Carnival card, and then you have to draw the Dark Scorpion, and then make multiple monsters to kind of like Geonator Transverser that card to your opponent. This has the same issue as the Exodia the Protector, and it has the same problem as Exodios, which is it's a win condition that has to happen in the battle phase, which means you can't do it on turn 1, kind of like Burn or any of these. Like there's not enough support for it, or Deck Out or Exodia. Like you can't just like kind of like FTK your opponent. You have to wait for them to create an established board, and then you have to play through your opponent's board plus hand traps. So like imagine trying to play through like a Pearly board, like a Kashtira board, and you're trying to get this nonsense off, and you're playing through all of their interruptions and all of their hand traps and all their trap cards, and you're playing through all of that and your imperm and all of that stuff on their board, and you're trying to OTK them with a win condition with all these bricks in your deck. Like it's just very, very tough to do. And Exodios is like actually a decent card on its own, and Exodia the Protector is like a decent, like an okay card, not as good as Exodios, but an okay card on its own. But this is just like useless. This is only used for this FTK, so I probably say it's probably in C tier. Next is Final Countdown. This is one that's kind of tough to judge, I'm not gonna lie, because this one has been kind of irrelevant for such a long time. It's been at 1, and I believe it's at 1 in the OCG, the TCG, and in Master Duel. So it's been at 1 for years and years and years and years. I don't remember the last time this card was at 3. Had to be years ago. This card, basically what it does, you activate it 20 turns later. After this card is activated, you win the duel. Plain and simple. All you have to do is just stretch the game out for 20 turns. Most Yu-Gi-Oh games today, you're lucky if they last 5 turns. But if 5 turns go by, you pretty much know who the winner is. It's very rare that a game even gets to 10 turns. Like 10 turns is like, wow, we had a back and forth, we had a long game. Like that's what you say when the game lasts like 10 turns. Like games don't last 20 turns. So while this was cool, I believe this was used by Bakura in the show. While this was cool on the show when Bakura did, like it just never happens in modern Yu-Gi-Oh. I think this card could come back to 3 and it wouldn't like make a huge impact. I will say this card did see some play when Mystic Mine was in the game. This card actually did see some play, but even at 1 it was kind of idiotic because this was their only win condition, and they would play Mystic Mine, lock their opponent out of, doing their thing, and then they would activate this card whenever they drew it, and then you essentially just waited 20 turns, and that was like the end of the game there. I'd say probably, if I'm being honest, probably in B tier. I think if this card came back to 3, it could maybe be up here. But again, stalling out a game for 20 turns in modern Yu-Gi-Oh is tough. Even with floodgates. It's still tough. Because they're going to draw the out eventually, right? Everyone runs Harpy's Feather Duster, at least one. Pretty much everyone runs it. Everyone runs back row outs in their extra deck. Like everyone plays something. So it's actually quite difficult to do this. And if we're being honest, like if you're playing a deck with a bunch of floodgates, eventually you're going to draw enough monsters to like just attack over your opponent's monsters and just win the game. Like why are you stretching it out this way anyway? But I suppose if you're playing Final Countdown, you've got other intentions. So yeah, I'd say probably B tier. All right, next up we've got Last Turn. This card's another one that's a little odd to judge because it's been banned for so long. So kind of putting it in tier list is a little weird because I don't remember, like this card was usable at the time. This is one of those cards that's more toxic than it is good. So basically Last Turn, what this basically does is during your opponent's turn, you can send, if they have 1,000 life points or less, specifically if they have 1,000 life points or less, you can send all you can select one monster on your side of the field, and then you can basically send all cards that you control, your opponent controls, all cards on both their, every card both of you controlled gets sent away, and then your opponent selects one card from one monster card from their deck, and they can special summon it, and then that monster battles the monster that you have on your side of the field. So the way that this works is, the way that they probably intended this to work was like you have a Blue Eyes White Dragon, your opponent summons like a Dark Magician, and then they battle out. Like it looks so cool and it's all great. And if you look closely, actually, this is really dumb. They select on this artwork, this is actually 2 spirit monsters. Now you can have a spirit monster on your side of the field, but your opponent can't possibly summon a spirit monster. They can't be special summoned. So this picture right here is physically impossible. You cannot do this. Like if you control I forget this guy's name. Hemato, something like that. If your opponent can't special summon Yamada Dragon, the picture is impossible. You can't even pull this off if you wanted to. But generally speaking, outside of that little pet peeve that I have, yeah, this card is, it requires you to get your opponent to very little life points, and then you have kind of like this, final battle, last turn. So basically, the strategy with this card is that you essentially get a monster that prevents your opponent from special summoning, like Jowgen the Spiritualist. And what he basically does is your opponent can't special summon. So you pick Jowgen the Spiritualist, activate this card, pick Jowgen the Spiritualist, send all other cards to the graveyard. Your opponent can't special summon anything because it says on Jowgen, neither player can special summon. And since your opponent can't special summon, they auto lose. Now, in theory, that is very good. And at the time, that's why this card got banned. Now, the problem is, in practice, you have to get your opponent down to 1,000 life points. If you've already got your opponent down to 1,000 life points, why do you need to do any of this? They're at 1,000 life points. This is the win more card of all time. it's like they're already at 1,000 life points. Just let it happen. They're one attack away. Just attack with the Jowgen. Jowgen's what, 200 attack? Do that 5 times. I'd rather do that 5 times than play this. But yeah, this is like, or technically you do it at the time. Jowgen was the way to do it, but you could do it with Fossil Dyna, which has over 1,000 attack. So you just do it with Fossil Dyna, attack one more time, and you win the duel. So I'd say probably, even though this card is banned, and I don't know if this will ever come back. It's one of those cards that should come back, but it's toxic, so they won't bring it back. But it should come back because it's not that good. I'm gonna say it's probably somewhere in C tier. I think it's easy to pull off, but except for the part where you have to get your opponent down to 1,000 life points. Like, other than that, if that wasn't printed on the card, I'd say this card should never come back. But honestly, it's not really that good. I'd say it's probably somewhere around C tier, because you have to inflict 7,000 damage to your opponent, and then you can do all of the funny business. So I'd say it's somewhere there. Next is Relay Soul. This is actually another F tier. This is actually an auto loss condition. So what this card does is you can special summon a monster from your hand. It's just a free special summon from the hand. Nice card. But if that monster leaves the field, you auto lose. You lose the duel. Terrible. You don't want to play this. Terrible card. It's the opposite of an auto win, but I just kind of included it here because it's just absolute garbage. Next is Self-Destruct Button. This is another card that isn't that good, but it is on the list because it's just one of those cards that's just toxic. So they can't bring it back because sometimes toxic cards are just not really fair to the game. So basically this has the same stipulation as last turn, where you need your life points to be your opponent's life points to be below 1,000, I think, and then you basically, both players, the duel basically ends in a draw. So it's kind of like Self-Destruct. If you ever played Pokemon, you've seen like an Electrode. You start a battle, Electrode self-destructs. Like, this is essentially what this card does. The whole point is you wipe out yourself and you wipe out your opponent. That is the entire point of this card. You essentially just wipe both players out and it ends in a draw. This was extremely toxic for years and years and years and years, because people would like show up to tournaments and they would have draw after draw after draw, and they would just essentially just ruin other people's records without any interest in winning whatsoever. Their whole point was just to ruin other people's records. So I would say probably it's somewhere in F tier. I think you have to reduce your own life points to 1,000 though. It doesn't have to be both players' life points are below 1,000. So you can like play. It's kind of like the if you ever seen Self-TK in Master Duel, this is like Self-TK on steroids, because technically speaking, you can activate all of the cards that are like, oh, inflict 2,000 life points to your opponent, inflict this amount of life points to your opponent, inflict, to yourself. You inflict life points to yourself over and over and over and over, and then you activate this when you have 1,000 life points and end it in a draw. And technically speaking, a draw is better than a loss. So on Master Duel, this would actually be quite interesting on Master Duel if it was to come back today. But yeah, I would say it's probably at the top of F tier. The reason it's at the top of F tier, because this is an auto loss. This you're never going to pull off, so it might as well be just a regular loss. And then this is a draw, so a draw is technically better than 2 losses. So we're gonna leave this as a draw. Next is the Final Countdown Destiny board Destiny board. This card is interesting. This one is interesting because it actually has support. I would say it's probably somewhere, you never see it actually done. I would say it's at the very top of C tier, maybe bottom of D tier. You never see it get done, but I'll be honest with you, it does have support, which is nice. And here's my problem with it. It's always been my problem with it. The cards are face up. You basically have to activate Destiny board, and then every turn you can put a new kind of piece onto the board, and it spells out the letters. It spells out the letters appropriately. But you essentially have to get these 5 letters onto the field. This plus the 5 letters, every turn you put a new one on. It's a cool win condition, except the problem is you have to last in a duel for 5 turns while you're doing this nonsense. And the other issue is you can't really play a lot of the New Age stall cards, which a lot of the New Age stall cards are, let's be honest, they're floodgates, right? Floodgates are the best ways to stall, period. Summon limit, goes in match, skill drain, blah, blah, it continues on and on and on. Those are the best ways to slow down the game. There can only be one, whatever it is. Those are the best cards in the game to floodgate your opponent. And what this does, unfortunately, is it fills up your back row, and if you can't put the next piece there, you can't continue, and they get sent to the graveyard. So that is a serious issue. That's number one. Number two, you have to protect your back row. So that, again, isn't like super easy to do. If you just lose one piece, you lose it all. You have to protect your back row. If you can't protect your back row, you lose the duel. That is another issue. Now, they do have a new field spell, which is actually, I would say, quite good, because it allows you to summon. It allows you to place the pieces, the letters, instead of into your back row, you can place them into your monster zones. But again, it just kind of leaves them, they're weak, and it leaves them at a vulnerable position where your opponent can just attack them, and then you lose the pieces anyway. I think it just has too many components where you just have to keep things alive, unfortunately. And if your entire deck is built around keeping things alive, and then you lose one of those things, like your entire win condition goes down the drain. So I'd probably say it's somewhere in C tier. Next is the Phantasm Spiral. I forget what, it's a Phantasm Spiral card. This is one that I almost never, I don't think I've ever done this. And I play the deck. I just uploaded a deck profile recently, but you definitely don't use this card. But basically what this card does is, if your Phantasm Spiral Dragon that's equipped with 3 different equip cards, destroys 3 effect monsters, you can activate this card from your hand, you automatically win the duel. That is not that hard to do by any means. By any means, it's not hard to do. You have to play 3 equips, the dragon, and you have to destroy 3 monsters. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. If you've done that, you probably have already won the duel. Because one equip spell gives you piercing, the other equip spell gives you 500 attack, and does 1,000 damage when you destroy an opponent's monster. And the last one makes your opponent discard. So you're doing piercing, you're inflicting damage, you're gaining 500 attack, you have a 3,400 attack monster that does piercing and inflicts 1,000 life points. That already is enough to reduce life points to 0. So what does this card really help you do? Like, if you already have that, you've won the duel. You don't need to do anything else like that. You're done. Like, this is kind of pointless. Now, I'll be honest with you. This is extremely easy to do, and it's very searchable. Like, if I wanted to do this, I could do it. But it's one of those cards where it's like, if you've already got the Phantasm Spiral Dragon with 3 equip spells, and you're already winning the match. The battle's done. Like, there's nothing left. So I would say it's probably, although it's easy to pull off, no matter, like, it's very easy to pull off. I wouldn't recommend playing it. I'd say it's probably somewhere at the bottom of C tier. Like, it's easy to pull off, but once you already have this card, like, you've already won the duel anyway. All right, next is Gimmick Puppet Disaster Leo. This one is actually it's an auto win condition, but so is the Gimmick Puppet Leo here. So basically, you can only summon this by ranking up Gimmick Puppet Leo, which is another auto win condition. There's 2 auto win conditions between these 2 cards. What this card does is neither player can target this card with card effects. You can only summon it by ranking up Leo, which is already, like I said, another win condition. And this card, basically what it does is you can detach a material and inflict 1,000 damage to your opponent. If you reach the end phase and this card has no materials and your opponent has 2,000 life points or less, you automatically win the duel. Now, this is like not terribly difficult to pull off, right? You need a few different components. So Leo requires 3 level 8 monsters to summon, plus you need a rank up card, plus you need to get your opponent's life points down to like 4,000, and then on top of that, you have to wait 2 turns while you inflict life points to your opponent twice, 1,000 each time, and then you have to reach the end phase, and if they have 2,000 or less, then you win. That requires so many steps. By then, you could have done any number of other things and won the duel. There's so many other things that you could have done in that span of time. Again, this is not impossible to do, but it's just like, why? Why would you do this? I would not build my entire deck around doing this stupid nonsense. I would just win with Gimmick Puppets the regular way. So I would say probably just from this. Again, it's one of those things where it's like the Phantasm Spiral card. Like, is it possible? Of course it's possible. But why in the world would you want to do this when you could just win the duel the regular way? Like, you have to go out of your way you have to go out of your way to do all of these steps to win. It almost takes longer to win if you're trying to do it this way than just winning the regular way. So to do this, you need 3 level 8 monsters. You need, like I said, 3 level 8 monsters, a quick play card. You need at least 2 turns and a way to inflict 4,000 life points to your opponent without this card. So you need like 7 other things for this to work, when if you do those 7 other things, you could just win the duel. So I'd say it's probably in C tier. All right, next is Gimmick Puppet Leo. This card is actually quite interesting because it's not even locked in Gimmick Puppets in any way. You can do this in any rank 8 deck, any deck that plays level 8. So you can do this in Dangers, Dark World. You can do this in Blue Eyes. You can do this in Galaxy Eyes. Technically, if you don't lock yourself into lights that turn, you can do this in Galaxy Eyes. But you can do this in any deck that basically can spam out level 8 monsters. Even the new cards, I forget what they're called, the new Egyptian Horus archetype, you can do this in that archetype, which is kind of crazy. But you can basically do this in any archetype that summons level 8 monsters. You summon 3 level 8 monsters, and then if you don't have any spawn trap cards in your back row, you can target this card and then attach, and then basically place a destiny counter on this card. And during that turn, you cannot attack. And basically, after you do that 3 times, you can essentially just auto win the duel. Now, again, this is one of those ones like Jackpot 7, but I think it's less bad than Jackpot 7 because technically you can start it up on turn 1, but it's just one of those that just takes multiple turns, and this card doesn't have any protection whatsoever. So if your opponent just destroys this, it's over. You can't have any cards in your back row, so you can't play like any of the floodgates or anything like that to protect this monster, or like even things like Wabaku. You can't even play things like Wabaku to protect this monster. You can't. Yeah, there's no protection whatsoever on this monster, so your opponent can just like attack it at any given time. It's really just kind of an odd one where you summon a monster that cannot be protected in any way whatsoever, and you hope that it survives 3 turns. So for that reason, I'd say it's probably somewhere around C tier. Like, it's probably possible, but I don't see myself playing it for any reason whatsoever. Again, you can splash this into any level 8 deck, and none of them have ever done it, and for very good reason. All right, next is number C100, Numeronius Numeronia. This card is, like, if you were to just read this card, like, its stats, its effects, it'd be crazy. But getting it out is like, I don't know how anyone would even attempt to get this card out. But basically, if you're Numeronius, which is another card that requires, I believe, like 4 level 12 monsters, if that guy is destroyed by your opponent's card effect, then you can special summon this guy. The problem is, again, summoning out the Numeronius while it has material, and having your opponent be stupid enough to destroy it. It's kind of like the flying elephant phenomenon, where your opponent just has to be a moron, doesn't read your cards. Oh yeah, all right, Geki, that card, sure, no problem. Yeah, but your opponent has to destroy that, and then you get to summon this thing, Numeronius Numeronia. When this card is special summoned, it has no protection, but it has 100,000 attack and defense. That is unreal. That's the highest stats we've ever seen on any Yu-Gi-Oh card ever. 100,000 attack, and then it has an effect during the next turn, not immediately the turn it's summoned, but during the next turn, your opponent, if your opponent has monsters, it has to attack it. It's like Berserk Gorilla. Your opponent it turns every one of your opponent's monsters into Berserk Gorilla. They have to attack your monster. So essentially, that 100,000 attack monster is getting attacked. It must be attacked. And then I don't know what moron wrote this on this card, but you can negate the attack and gain life points equal to the amount of your opponent's attack. Why would you negate their attack? If they attack, you win. Because it's 100,000. Who is contending with that monster? Who are you summoning that can out by battle a monster with 100,000 attack and 100,000 defense? Who are they summoning? Why would you ever want to negate that attack? Come on, man. Like, why? And then it has another effect where if your opponent didn't battle, right? They have to battle, but if they didn't battle, right, they got scared, you win the duel. Finally, that is the win condition. After all of reading basically, basically reading the entire, like, the Yu-Gi-Oh version of the Bible, you have to do all of those steps in order to finally find a win condition, which is if your opponent, for some reason, right, they don't summon a monster and they don't attack and then end their turn, then they lose. This card has no protection whatsoever, if other than like attack negation. Yeah, you have attack negation when your monster is 100,000 attack. This card is so stupidly written, but I understand it's a win condition. They can't make it too good. So I'd say it's probably somewhere in like bottom of D tier. It's just, I've never seen anybody successfully do this ever in my life, and I don't think I ever will, unless they print new cards that make it a little too easy to do. Next is the Ghostrick Angel. Ghostrick Angel actually isn't that bad. It's been done a few times. I'd say it's probably somewhere at the top of B tier. Basically, what this card does is if it has 10 materials or more at any time, you win the duel automatically. You just win. If this card has 10 materials, you win. So basically what you do is you special summon Bamboozling Gossip Shadow, which is a rank 3 monster that can be made with any amount of level 3. So you can make, you can put 6 level 3s on the board technically, right? You can summon a Synchro or a Fusion to your extra monster zone, and then you can use the 6 monsters to put them on a Bamboozling Gossip Shadow, and then you transfer the Bamboozling Gossip Shadow's material over to this Ghostrick Angel, and when it has 10 materials, you win the duel. It's not terribly difficult to do. You see it top every once in a while. I'd say I probably placed it a little too high. I'd probably say it's somewhere like, I don't think it's better than Exodia, but it's actually been seeing recent play in Pearly, believe it or not. So I'd say it's probably somewhere in B tier. Not a terribly difficult thing to do, but not like a terribly not difficult. Like, it's just, I don't think it's that difficult to do, but I don't think it's that easy to do either. So I'd say it's probably somewhere in B tier. I think that is beyond fair for where it should be. It's not that it's hard, and the good thing is you can actually do it going first, so it's better than this Exodia Defender. I'd say Exodia Defender's here, just because if you have to go second, it sets up a bad situation. Same thing with like all of these. If there's any going second win conditions, that's already tough to play through, but you can actually do this going first, which is nice. This is a repeat for some reason. We're not going to address this because it's literally right here. Yeah, and next is the Sumo card. This card's another weird one where, like, it's not that difficult to pull off, but it's just kind of, it's not that it's like, it actually is kind of difficult to pull off now that I think about it. So basically what this card does is you roll a dice, and this card moves around in a circle on your field and your opponent's field based on the number that you rolled. So, let's say it's summoned in one spot on the field. You roll a dice, and then it moves counterclockwise over to the amount you rolled. So you can actually move it to your opponent's side of the field and take their monster. But you hope that doesn't happen. But whatever monster it lands on becomes material to this card, and if it lands on your own monster, the materials are transferred to this card, and once it has 6 materials, you win the duel automatically. So you have to essentially roll a dice, move this monster onto one of your monsters. Typically it's going to be, Bamboozling Gossip Shadow, you guessed it. And then when it successfully lands on that card, you automatically win the duel. The way to do this is to just make, again, multiple monsters with a lot of XYZ material and hope that you don't roll too high and end up on your opponent's board. But that's basically the way to do it. It's not consistent. It's not consistent in any way. I've never, again, this is one of those that I've never, ever seen anybody pull off in a duel. So I would say it's probably somewhere in D tier. Never seen a human being pull this off ever. I guess you can go play against the computer and pull it off, but I wouldn't recommend doing it. It is not a good win condition whatsoever, but it is our last win condition. And that should be the end of the video. If there's anything that you disagree with, please put it in the comment section down below. And if there's something that you specifically want to see, please let me know. And thank you for watching. La, 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 la.